These 7 have the saddest backstory of all Genshin characters, starting with Chi-Chi. An ordinary herb-picking lass named Chi-Chi lost her way and trespassed the realm of the Adepti. Injuring her right leg in a fall, she hurriedly hid in a cavern to rest. Even occupied as she was in bandaging her wound, she could hear sounds that did not belong to the mortal plane. But she could have never expected that with a huge crash, she would forever be trapped between life and death. Whether Adepti or demons, just or wicked, all understood that she was an innocent mortal caught in the crossfire. Or perhaps it was by the will of the heaven that she received a vision in her dying moments, and so ended this war between Adepti and demon. The Adepti could not bear to let her die, and each imparted to her a portion of the strength, meaning to breathe life back into her body. Chi-Chi did indeed awaken and live again, but went into a berserk state, unable to control the Adepti energy raging through her. Seeking to end the disturbance, Mountain Shaper had no choice but to seal her in amber. After hundreds of years, Chi-Chi was discovered by humans, still trapped in amber, and was brought back to Wansheng funeral parlor for burial. The mountain roads were treacherous, however, and the amber was bumped about. Coupled with the passing of many years, the seal on Chi-Chi was all but spent. She awakened in the middle of the night, broke the amber in secret, and fled. Following the herb-picking habits of her previous life, Chi-Chi headed right for the hills. By chance, she met Baiju, the boss of Boo Boo Pharmacy, on the way, and he took her in. As a zombie, Chi-Chi has trouble retaining memories. That's why she carries a notebook in which she details everything she needs to do for the day, which also serves as a reminder in case she forgets something or someone. This is quite sad for her, but what happened with Collie is even sadder. Before that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Collie was born sickly, so her worried parents brought her to a seer and begged him to save her. He explained the illness as being touched by the Div, supernatural creatures with negative properties, and claimed that they had to give their daughter to him in order to save her. However, he was working with the Fatui Harbinger Dotore, and instead of saving her, turned Collie into a test subject for their Archon residue experiments. Whether the Fatui had let Collie go or if she had escaped herself is unknown, but she eventually found herself wandering alone. On account of her sickliness, she was treated poorly wherever she went. She was often abused by passing pedestrians, had stones thrown at, and pushed around. This fueled her hatred for people and the gods, and a strong desire for vengeance. The disease Collie is afflicted with is called Eleazar. Unique to Sumeru, this is a disorder that causes dark and hardened scales to form on the body. First symptoms are mild numbness on the affected areas of the skin, but as the disease progresses, symptoms of general fatigue and peripheral paresthesia, which is the abnormal sensation of the skin on the limbs, may occur. The final stage of this disease causes complete paralysis of the afflicted person, rendering them completely immobile. These symptoms hint that Eleazar might be a neurological disease. This condition is what causes Collie to be perceived as clumsy by other people, as it affects the ability to hold or carry objects, often dropping them to the ground. According to Tignari, there is no cure for Eleazar. Only preventive care may be provided to stop the disease from advancing to a more serious stage. In the days Collie spent with the Fatui, Dottore was able to keep the disease controlled by unknown method. Upon the removal of Greater Lord Rukadevta's consciousness from Irmin's soul, Collie and the other Eleazar patients have recovered. When Collie first arrives in Mondstadt, she is extremely wary and suspicious of people because of her past experiences. She was initially annoyed by Amber because of her cheerful and optimistic personality, but Amber shows her kindness by offering to help her find that something she lost. It is clear that Collie has yet to fully put her trauma behind her. Whilst no longer being bitter about it, Collie still finds it very difficult to open up to others about her past and avoids the subject when possible. She is also prone to panic attacks and breakdowns, and especially hates being pushed or shoved around. Even just trying to touch her might cause extreme fear and discomfort, as shown when Paimon tried to playfully touch her the day they met for the first time in Sumeru. This shock apparently triggered a flare-up of her disease, causing her to be bedridden for the next day. Dottore didn't only destroy Collie's life, but also Scaramouche's. Before A began creating a puppet of her own godly form, she took it upon herself to create a prototype puppet. The initial plan was to simply discard it, but he shed tears upon his creation. This led A to notice that he had his own conscience and emotions, and interfering with his fate to end his existence would be too cruel. So, she sealed his power as a divine creation and set him free instead, allowing him to take control of his own life. However, The puppet would come to see A's action as rejection and betrayal. He saw her not only as his creator, but also as his mother. He developed a distorted image of A in his mind as someone who only values power above all, seeing no worth in him, and viewing himself as a failed product that was discarded. For a time, the puppet settled in Tatarasuna, which had been infiltrated by Dottore to pave the groundwork for the Fatui's future endeavors in Inazuma, disguised himself as Esther and revolutionized the forging process in the Mikage furnace to help smith weapons by using crystal marrow. However, people did not know that the marrow was the remains of Orobashi and that it contained malevolent energy, which began to kill people over time. Kabukimono went to the shogun to request an audience while Niwa was murdered by Dottore. Kabukimono was unsuccessful in getting the shogun's aid, and when he returned, was told by Dottore that Niwa had fled and left the people to its fate. Dottore gave Kabukimono a box, and when he told him to open it, he found a withered human heart, which Dottore claimed was from a subordinate that Niwa had killed. This angered Kabukimono and he left Tatarasuna. He would come to regard Niwa's presumed actions as a second of his life's betrayal. At some point after this, he befriended a young boy plagued with an illness. The boy made a promise to live together with him as family, but later died, breaking the promise. Kabukimono considered this his life's third and final betrayal, and he began wandering across Inazuma. The puppet was eventually found by Piero, who persuaded him to join the Fatui and take his place at the banquet against the divine. Intrigued by the jester's words, he joined their ranks and had his innate power as an Archon's creation unlocked in exchange for becoming a subject of Dottore's research and experiments. The following century, he would lead an expedition to Abyss Operators of the Saritsa. He becomes a major antagonist in Sumro during Chapter 3, where he serves as a climactic boss battle in the form of Shuki no Kami, an artificial god. Following his defeat, he falls into a comatose state and is hidden away by Lesser Lord Kusanali. After recovering and learning that Dottore was responsible for the Tatarasuna incident, Scaramouche erases all information of his entire existence from Irminsul, hoping to change the past and give those in the past a second chance in life. His efforts, however, only led to Tevat forgetting him and his history rather than directly changing any past event. Scaramouche becomes a wanderer as a result, though his new life of wandering only made him crave a new purpose, that is, to take revenge. But he is not the only one who hates the Fatui. Sometimes life can change in an instant. The day that Creepus, Diluc's dad, spoke these words to Diluc would turn out to be the latter's last as a knight of Favonius. For on that day, a horrific monster attacked the transport fleet he and his father were traveling with. There was no time for Diluc to send for help. The monster was stronger than any of the young cavalry captain had ever encountered and overpowered him. Diluc could never have anticipated the way this battle would end. His father, who had denied admittance into the knights and who was shunned by the gods, defeated the monster with an unknown evil power. Before, that same power backfired, mortally wounding Creepus himself. Creepus died shortly after in his son's arms. With a heavy heart, Diluc returned to the Knights' headquarters, only to receive an unthinkable order from Inspector Irok: conceal the truth. Irok insisted that the incident must be portrayed as an unfortunate accident in order to maintain the reputation of Knights of Favonius in the eyes of the public. Such was the sheer outrageousness of his request that Diluc did not think it was even worth trying to argue. Diluc's father had once said to him that the world would never turn its back on the faithful, but now the Knights of Favonius trampled on his faith like it was nothing. Diluc resigned from the Knights that day and left everything behind, including his vision. He swore to avenge his father's death and to find the source of that occult power which had caused his father's demise. After Diluc resigned and discarded his vision, he handed the running of the Dawn Winery over to the head housemaid and left Mondstadt altogether. Diluc traveled all across the 7 nations of Teyvat in search of the truth. All clues pointed toward a behemoth of organization, the Fatui. He learned that they made counterfeit visions in secret, calling them delusions. A delusion could amplify the power of its bearer to its extreme, but also carried the risk of backfiring. That was what had caused his father's death. Like an eagle scouring the wilderness, he set off on his hunt for the truth. Determination burned like fire in his heart. Unending battles could not sway him away from the course. He pressed on relentlessly, scarred but undeterred, like a fiery tornado burning through dense dense fog of mystery. The Harbingers monitored Diluc's progress from the shadows. The prowess with which he laid waste to numerous Fatui strongholds caught their attention and forced them to take action. After his close encounter with death, Diluc took a long hard look at his past and the anger he had harbored for so long. 4 years on, Diluc had returned in Mondstadt and taken over as head of the family winery, now a young man. What happened to Diluc was tragic, but Raiden Shogun's suffering was on a whole another level. Before Raiden A became the shogun, she was a samurai responsible for seeing that the previous shogun's orders were carried out. The previous Electro Archon, Raiden Makoto, was no great fighter, and the things A had charge over were mostly matters of warfare and slaughter. However, A had also moments of repose away from battle, sitting with her friends under the sakura trees and playing karuta. However, their peaceful reign was shattered by the cataclysmic events of the Kanria War, a devastating conflict that ravaged Inazuma and left it in ruins. As a war general, A was entrusted with defending Inazuma against the forces of Kanria. During the war, her friends and allies succumbed to the corrupting influence of the Abyss, making them wreak havoc throughout the country. With a heavy heart, A was forced to confront and defeat her corrupted comrades one by one, a painful duty that weighed heavily on her heart. Unfortunately, this is not the biggest blow the war dealt to her. It is the death of her twin sister, Makoto. To this day, A still often remembers that sakura tree. Due to having lost many of her loved ones over the centuries, A is driven by a fear of further loss, wanting to preserve Inazuma. To this end, she previously sealed herself in the plane of euthymia to keep herself from the effects of erosion. She created the puppet shogun to ensure immunity from the decay of her physical body and to govern the land. A locked herself in to prevent Inazuma, but the Hydro Archon is no different. Fiorina, the supposedly Archon of Fontaine, was not the true Hydro Archon. Focalors, the successor of Egeria, had separated her divinity from her body and spirit. Fiorina was the Archon's body and spirit but had no powers. Focalors used Fiorina as a way to deceive the heavenly principles in order to prevent the result of the prophecy regarding Fontaine from becoming a permanent reality. Fiorina was tasked with maintaining the guise of the Archon and cursed by Focalors so that she could not die nor pursue her own happiness as long as Focalors lived. As a new human, she had difficulty taking the role but eventually mastered it. Aware of the prophecy that would doom Fontaine, Fiorina assumed the role of the Hydro Archon for 500 years. While she was successful in this task, it wore her down mentally so that she suffered from severe self-esteem issues and paranoia. She took all of that upon herself and acted as the Archon. Even the other Archons give her respect for that. Being somebody you are not takes a whole another level of willpower. She not only played it for 500 years but also managed the nation well. The more the years in somebody's life, the more the number of hardships, and the oldest character in this game is none other than the Geo Archon. Having lived for over 6,000 years, Zhongli has first-hand experience with much of Teyvat's history. He has presumably witnessed many of Teyvat's events, such as the Cataclysm, the creation of the Chasm, and the fall of the Arya, Sonnet, and Canon. Nonetheless, he is most known for his cold-blooded participation in the Archon War and his founding earlier. Around the beginning of the Archon War, Zhongli was the co-ruler of prosperous Gearly Assembly, alongside the God of Dust, Guzhong, and the Adepti. During a certain battle, despite their best efforts and the aid of the Adepti, Guzhong was overpowered by the opponent and Gearly Assembly was destroyed. After a massive flood swept through the area 3,700 years ago, Zhongli was forced to move his people south and establish the Liyue Harbor, which stands to this day. This man lost his lover and his Adepti too. He must have seen many of his dear friends die and has killed a lot. That's why his signature line makes a lot of sense now. He also keeps lots of secrets, thereby who knows how much suffering and pain he has gone through his life and how much he's going to take in the coming years. Sitting there drinking tea alone makes a lot of sense for this character, because all of his friends are no more. With great power often comes great responsibility. Zhongli's story and responsibility hasn't come to an end.